The day they mocked the quiet new nurse began like any other shift, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the smell of antiseptic clinging to the air, but beneath that ordinary surface, something heavy was about to break open. She stood at the far end of the corridor, small-framed, shoulders slightly hunched, hands folded tight at her waist as if holding herself together by sheer will. Her name was Emma Carter, and she had learned long ago that silence could be safer than speaking, especially in places where people mistook quietness for weakness. She did not know that by the end of that day, a thunderous wind would tear through the hospital grounds, and everything they thought they knew about her would be ripped apart. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a second right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and judging people by their hearts rather than their appearances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment below where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can be told. Emma had transferred to St. Gabriel Medical Center only 3 weeks earlier. It was a busy urban hospital where confidence was currency and volume often replaced compassion. The other nurses were experienced, loud, fast-moving, and bonded by years of shared exhaustion. Emma moved differently. She listened more than she spoke. She triple-checked charts. She stayed late to sit beside patients who had no visitors. To some, that made her seem slow. To others, it made her invisible. Whispers followed her down the hallways, not cruel at first, just dismissive, then sharper as days passed. They laughed at her plain scrubs, at how she flinched when voices were raised, at the way she avoided break-room gossip. No one asked why her eyes carried a faraway weight, or why her hands sometimes trembled when alarms rang. She carried her past like a sealed box she never opened in public. Years earlier, Emma had been someone else entirely, forged in pressure and fire, trained to keep calm while the world exploded. She had learned how to stop bleeding with bare hands, how to breathe through chaos, how to carry the weight of others when her own legs wanted to give out. But that life had ended the night she lost someone she loved more than herself, a loss that cracked something deep inside her. She walked away from uniforms and ranks, from the roar of engines and the sound of orders barked through headsets, and chose a path where healing felt quieter. Nursing felt like a way to atone, to keep saving lives without having to remember the ones she could not. The hospital did not know this version of Emma. They only saw the quiet nurse who did not defend herself when jokes landed too hard. During one especially brutal shift, a senior nurse snapped at her in front of others when a supply cart was misplaced, and laughter rippled down the hall. Emma's face flushed, her throat tightened, but she nodded, fixed the problem, and moved on. Inside, the old training whispered for her to stand her ground, but grief had taught her that pride could be expensive. She chose silence again. Then came the emergency that would change everything. It started with a multi-vehicle accident on the highway, sirens screaming as ambulances flooded the bay. The emergency room swelled with chaos, stretchers lining the corridors, doctors shouting for blood types and imaging. Emma moved instinctively, her body remembering what her mind tried to forget. She assessed wounds in seconds, stabilized airways, coordinated movement with a precision that surprised anyone paying attention. Still, few were paying attention. They were too busy surviving the surge. As the hours dragged on, a critical patient arrived, a man with injuries far beyond what the hospital usually handled. His vitals were unstable, his trauma complex, and specialists were called in urgently. Emma was assigned to assist, and as she worked, a familiar tension settled into her muscles. She recognized the signs, the kind of injuries she had seen before in places far from city hospitals. Something about this case felt different, heavier, like the air before a storm. The storm arrived without warning. A deep, rhythmic thudding rolled through the walls, rattling windows and silencing the room mid-motion. The sound grew louder, unmistakable, impossible. People rushed to the windows as a Navy helicopter descended onto the hospital grounds, its blades slicing the air with authority. Staff stared in disbelief as uniformed personnel poured out, moving with purpose, their presence commanding instant attention. The hospital, moments ago loud and chaotic, fell into stunned quiet. The helicopter had come for the patient, but not only for him. The team demanded immediate coordination with someone who understood combat trauma at the highest level, someone trained to operate under fire, someone who had worked alongside Navy SEAL units in active zones. Administrators scrambled, voices tight with panic, insisting that such expertise was not on staff. Time bled away as the patient's condition worsened. That was when a senior doctor remembered something odd from earlier reports, something about the quiet nurse who moved like she had seen worse than this. Emma stood near the back, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might shatter her ribs. When her name was called, disbelief rippled through the room. Laughter threatened to resurface, but it died quickly as the Navy team turned toward her, recognition dawning in their eyes before a single credential was shown. They addressed her not as a nurse, but as the combat medical professional she once was, a specialist who had saved lives in conditions most people could not imagine. In that moment, the weight of her past pressed down hard, but so did the memory of why she had left. She took a breath, steadied herself, and stepped forward. The hospital watched as the quiet nurse transformed, her movements decisive, her voice calm and clear, cutting through confusion like a blade. She coordinated procedures with the Navy team seamlessly, her hands sure, her mind sharp. The patient stabilized under her guidance, seconds stretching into fragile hope. Faces around her changed as understanding replaced mockery. The people who had dismissed her now watched in awe as she led with humility and unmatched skill. There was no triumph in her expression, only focus, only care. When the helicopter finally lifted away with the patient secured, the roar fading into the distance, the hospital exhaled as one. Afterward, the corridors felt different. The same lights buzzed overhead, but something intangible had shifted. Apologies came quietly, some spoken, others carried in lowered eyes and softened tones. Emma accepted them with grace, not because she needed validation, but because she understood how easy it was to misjudge what you could not see. She returned to her duties, sitting beside patients, holding hands, offering comfort in the small ways that mattered. Near the end of this story, if this journey has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so these stories of compassion and resilience can continue to reach others. Emma never spoke publicly about her past. She did not need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any story she could tell. In the weeks that followed, the hospital changed too, just slightly, but enough. Kindness grew where ridicule once lived. People learned to look twice, to listen longer, to remember that everyone carried unseen battles. Please comment just before this story ends and tell us what this story made you feel and whether you've ever been underestimated for being quiet. The quiet new nurse continued walking the halls, still soft-spoken, still gentle, but now seen for who she truly was, not because a helicopter landed, but because the truth has a way of rising, loud and undeniable, when the moment demands it.